Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Lecture 20 Summary, Effective Communication in Clinical Research. So we started off the lecture talking about safety outcomes. Typically, they're presented as secondary outcomes, but it's important because safety has to be a component that's assessed through some part of the protocol. There's one main issue of looking at safety only as a secondary outcome. When it comes to assessing adverse effects, it's difficult to assess the causality because they're typically rare events. Therefore, when you're looking at secondary outcomes, the study is not powered to detect the differences between the groups. And in the end, you cannot definitively say that there is a significant difference based on your intervention. Leading into the presentation on manuscript writing, to summarize some of the main themes and important topics that came up. Scientific writing mainly differs from regular writing because you're often writing about original research. There's a clear intent and format, and you want to convey the problem, what you found, and how it relates to broader research. When you sit down to tackle a manuscript, it's best to find your main entranceway. You can start with the results or the methods because they're typically more how you did and what you did. Then you can transition to the introduction and discussion, as they are often more challenging because they incorporate more of an argument and context. And when multiple people contribute to a paper, it's important to end with a cohesive product, with the first author's voice, mainly the PI, tying it all together. One of the best things you can do when you find strong, significant results in your findings is to do your research, pun intended, on the journal that you'd like to publish in. You should spend the time to identify appropriate journals that align with your topic and the audience you want to reach. When writing your paper, the goal is to get the story across as quickly as possible. You really want to express your ideas logically, concisely, and clearly. Professor Fregney and Professor Donald both agree that it's more impressive when a writer is able to tell the story easily and clearly for the reader. Along these lines, it's also good to remember who your audience is. Maybe your audience is not as advanced as the reviewers in the journal, but you still must include all of your methods and techniques. Here, it might be a good idea to include a methods appendix because the methods section is most harshly reviewed for sound science. When crafting your title, the most important thing to ask yourself is whether it captures what's going on in your paper. The format does not matter so much as whether the title accurately encompasses the story of your paper. One advice is to look at recent articles that were published by your journals of interest. In your introduction, Professor Donald explained that there are 3 easy steps to follow. First, provide background and context of the problem. Next, focus in on your specific topic and demonstrate where there's a gap in the knowledge. Lastly, you should write how you address the gap in your novel way. In comparison, the results section is mostly comprised of tables and figures, but it's also a good idea to use words to point out the main findings. The last part is dealing with rejection. This is an important part of the writing process. When interacting with your reviewers, the best approach is to be polite. Sometimes working with reviewers can be difficult, but you have to do it with the knowledge that the reviewers are important to the journal, and at the end of the day, they're the ones deciding to accept your manuscript. If you get a rejection, the best thing to do is just move on and review your paper and revise. There are 2 main ways to do this, through macrostructure and microstructure. When you're reviewing your macrostructure, you're checking paragraph by paragraph what each chunk of the paper means and if it makes sense. Reviewing your microstructure means more sentence by sentence review. You're looking at the fundamental components of a sentence, such as the subject, verb, and object. And here, you generally want to avoid cluttered sentences and long sentences. So thank you guys so much. I hope this summary helped, and we will see you next week in lecture.